So I kind of talked myself into recording or presenting, and then didn't have time to really prepare. So this is a very quick presentation on trade-offs. Basically, just summarizes what Hadley thinks are the main trade-offs between S3 and R6, and between S3 and S4. And then we're going to dive into FF Scraper, which is a package I'm working on that, as of 30 days ago, did not use S3, but now uses S3 because of this wonderful Advanced R Book Club. And it's actually probably better than it does now. But one of the things that we'll be talking about, I guess, is figure out whether I should have used R6 or S4 instead. Sorry, my screen, I don't know if you guys got that. And basically, we'll figure out, I'll do some live coding just to show you kind of examples of R6 and S4 that I found in the wild, and kind of the API that I was trying to model by using S3. There's a few things that I'm a little iffy about, so definitely we'll get into more of a discussion-based presentation, and I'll take you through kind of FF Scraper just to show you S3 in the wild. Yeah. So Hadley on S3 versus S4. So what he said right off the bat, S3 is informal, whereas S4 is formal, which partially means S3 relies on conventions, i.e. informal rules that the users agree to, despite basically, the honor system, because it's flexible and easily abused. S4 has structure. You cannot as easily abuse it. So it doesn't need to you don't need to train your users, because they just won't be able to do something in S4 with that S3 would just allow. So that's why it's better in larger, more rigorous projects that are established. Bioconductor, for example, would have a lot of and pre-existing code that you don't want someone to just kind of mess around with. Whereas in S3, they could, be rude, or did he say rude? That you could essentially either write a method for a class that you didn't own or a generic that you don't own. I think Tyler was using that particular feature the other day in the chat. I don't remember exactly where or why that was, but I don't think you can do that in S4, basically. Versus R6. R6 is encapsulated, so everything belongs to an object, whereas S3 is functional. So one of the things that comes out of that is namespacing is global, and R6 is local to the object. So when you make a name in an S3 class, generic, function, package, you have to be really careful to make sure that your names don't override something else that they might be using. So you can't use dplyer's filter, which also masks base R stats package filter, which always creates a namespace collision. So you don't have to worry about that in R6, because what R6 will do is it's local to that object. So you can name it whatever you want, whatever makes sense for your class, regardless of what it might mean in another package or in base R or otherwise. S3 is functional. It feels more natural to the average R user who's used to things like the tidyverse. R6 does not. You have to access, it's almost like subsets of an object in order to use the method. These are kind of, I think that's what, I'm paraphrasing my understanding of what Hadley was saying. The last thing is that R6 has state, where S3 does not. So things like accumulative programming or threading state is easy to accomplish in R6, because R6 you can change the state of the object in place. But in S3 you actually have to return a whole new object that then gets a super assigned into the environment, or do some other abuse abusive things. That makes sense. I think that was the end of my thoughts on Hadley's thoughts. Did anyone have questions about those? Oh, good. Moving on. Wait. Chat. Chat is empty. Where's this chat? No. Chat. Is state method chaining? Yes and no. So I'll pull open the book. I don't think it. So basically, it had this example go something like, okay, so if your function both needs to return a value, i.e. the object at the top of a particular list, for example, the first item in a list, as well as remove that object from the top, you can't modify the input object in S3. So you actually have to return the whole object again. Whereas in R6, you can create a function that says remove the first item in this list as a side effect without having to return the object into the returning the object as one of the results of as one of the returns of the function. That makes sense? So you can keep track of what it's doing. Like you can do stuff to the R6 object in memory without having to return the whole object to overwrite the current object. I feel like I'm tying myself into knots. I think I'm getting it, but I think you nod. I don't think you said anything. So yeah, good.
Yeah, I think you described that right. Because I wouldn't say so that concept you're describing. I don't know if state's not the right name for it, but it enables method chaining. I don't know what the proper name for it is though. Like returning
modify in place.
Yeah, well, allowing modified in place, but like, what is that? I don't know. What is that action? Yeah.
I guess, yeah, I think state is part of that, or that is part of what state does. I think of state as that you can call the same function with the same arguments and get a different result depending on state.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And that's a thing you can do easily with R6, but it's difficult with S3. You can do it with function factories. We did see that, but it's not necessarily a good idea. Whereas
this
R6
is
kind of built
the proposed way that Hadley said that you should do it. He kind of mentions it in an offhand comment near the end somewhere. Method chaining is more like invisibly returning the R6 object so you can access another function out of it. So it's like building in the pipe feature specifically. So it's not state, but I think it's a separate idea from state. Method chaining would be more like the pipe in functional programming, where the pipe is a function that enables method chaining, or function chaining, not method chaining. I think that's how I would describe that. Am I referring to pass by reference? Maybe. I lost that.
Yeah, I think that's sort of a right way of describing it, like this pass by reference thing, where like something that you pass into the function can be modified. Like without. That was a good way to say it.
Returning it as one of the side effects of the function.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's what that's getting at. Yeah, password reference sounds right then.
Maya has a question about when would you use S4? I think the simple answer in R is if you're working in bioconductor. There are some other cases, but that bioconductor has adopted S4 way more so than pretty much anybody else. I considered S4 for something I was doing because it was slightly faster than S3. But it's weird, and so I didn't. Like, I wanted to stick with what I'm familiar with.
So I've heard of S3 for like different databases or like APIs. Like, what about like different cloud servers? Maybe there's like so much like different configuration stuff between like cloud providers that like somehow S4 becomes justified over like S3 and generics and methods.
I mean, maybe, but I feel like APIs R6 does really well with. So
yeah, maybe that too.
If you're going to leave S3, usually go to R6, it seems like. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to wander into So DBI I was looking at actually uses S4. So that's the main database package that's run by the tidyverse. And I think it feels like S3. I think I use it like S3, but the reason DBI is like a parent package that has a bunch of generics, but there's different methods depending on the database that you're connecting to. So whether that's MySQL or Postgres, I think I started on that at some point back here. Skip. Link. Huzzah. Okay. We're now looking at a GitHub page, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I don't know why they do it with an S4 class, but I imagine it's because it's more strict in how it's implemented. So if there was a different database engine, the person who was writing that would have to use the same S4 structures to make theirs work.
I think it could partly be that the classes that they're working with aren't at all like base classes. Like they're database driver classes.
Yeah.
So you don't have any reason to have a method for character when you're working in DBI, for example. Maybe?
Right. So like it doesn't inherit very much from base R? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. That it's really its own thing. So maybe that is a time when it makes sense. Maybe?
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Can you guys hear me?
No, just until just now.
Yeah.
I have a selfish question. So based off of what John was just saying. So if you're going to write methods for like different types, that's when you use S3. But if you're going to write methods for like custom things you make up, it's better to use S4? Or that's not at all what you just said?
It's what I said. It is something that just came to me just now looking at DBI. I don't know how strongly I stand by the idea.
Yeah. So can I give a selfish example after reading this chapter? I had to make this thing for work that I'm going to oversimplify right now. But I have 3 file types, and I created a mean function, and if it's one of the 3 file types, those are the classes, are those file names, if that makes sense. You have file A, B, and C. So mean A is different from mean A, it's different from B is different from C. And I thought I was super clever to use S3 in this instance. But you think S4 would be better than that, for that, because each of those are technically just different character strings.
I think S4 is a very special choice to make, and you have to be very comfortable with it,
Yeah.
and otherwise use S3. Otherwise, oh, you muted yourself to avoid the echo, I think, and now are trying to talk.
Sorry, that was me trying to be helpful.
Whoa, 10 is over it. You muted me. I guess what I'm getting at is S4 is the shakiest chapter of mine in the book, and I'm wondering how deep I should go, or screw it, I'm probably never going to use it. I should be psyched that I kind of understand R6, and I've used S3 officially.
I personally would focus on S3 and R6.
Cool. Bye.
My bad. Yeah, so I'm going to go through kind of an example I used to learn what S3 kind of ins and outs that I've found out. That's what we're going to go through next. So FF Scraper is a package I've been working on. Kind of started just before we started book club, or sometime a little bit after that. And then I started writing it, and then basically decided that this was a good example to teach myself how to use S3. So the goal of this package is to abstract the code that's required to call various fantasy football APIs. Some of them are MFL, Sleeper, Flea Flicker, blah, blah, blah. It creates methods that handles authentication, forms the appropriate calls, and returns tidy and predictable data, which can be connected to other data sources. Yes, I know sports aren't really existing right now, but I'm writing this to be prepared, okay? Also, in other words, it's a DBI-like interface. You don't need to know the nuts and bolts of each platform, and you just need to know a little bit about it, about the package itself to get the data that you want. Okay, so motivation. So one, teach myself about our packages. At some point, I want to look at Golem with an unbiased opinion about how painful it is to use. So at some point, I would like to build an app with Golem without internally hating every minute of it. So our package is supposed to help, which I think it might actually. Two is to teach myself about unit testing, CI/CD, and CRAN. Three, to share some experience, because I've got a lot of experience hitting these APIs for myself, so I kind of know the code offhand. But others don't have that same knowledge, but they would probably benefit from, being able to access that data without learning the nuts and bolts of fantasy football APIs and how you call them and pass arguments and so on. And unexpectedly, four, experiment with S3 and object-oriented programming, right? I guess it's kind of a side benefit. So I'll show you kind of FF Scraper before I learned anything about S3. You can use GitHub's wonderful go back in time feature and show you kind of one of the features here. So before S3, I knew about S3. I had this idea of.
Can you zoom in on your screen and make the font bigger?
Oh, too late. Okay. Sorry. So before I knew anything about S3, this was June 7th, so a month ago today, I decided that I wanted to have a function called FF whatever, fantasy football FF. Okay. And what this would do is they are all labeled the same way. They all have the same arguments, and it would automatically figure out how to. It would figure out how to call that particular feature. Which, after I read about S3, I was like, this is literally what S3 is supposed to be doing, so I should use that. But I'll show you kind of what I did before that, which is abuse some switch statements. So FF Connect, you pass in a platform argument, you pass in a league ID and some other dots. So it checks the string. It says, okay, if platform is not in this, we only have code for this right now, and then gets to the meat of this, which is uses a switch function, which I learned about in conditions or something somewhere before that in Advanced R as well. So switch platform, if platform is equal to MFL, run MFL connect with league ID equals this, and the rest of the arguments from dots. And then if it was sleeper, run for a sleeper league, sleeper connect, league ID, dots. And then the same thing with FF league, which is to say, pass in the connection object. This is obviously inspired a little bit by DBI. If the platform is MFL, is not MFL, stop, and then otherwise continue onward with switch to run the MFL league summary function. If there was a sleeper league, you would run the sleeper league function with that connection object. And then essentially, here's a bunch of functions that I wanted to get to afterwards. So basically, what this supposed to look like, but doesn't. Oh, by the way, anyways, sorry, distracted by chat. So what this essentially is supposed to be doing but isn't doing is an S3 generic that then has a method for MFL objects or otherwise. Spacebar. Why would I use a spacebar? I don't get it. I'm missing the joke.
So Tan?
Yes.
Could you have created a class of MF1 type or sleeper type and then just pass that and use the generic?
Yeah, absolutely. So after a while, I didn't use styler, obviously. I think John is complaining. After a while, so I still haven't figured out how to do FF Connect properly because this is kind of like the new function. So you still kind of have to create a function and then pass it to the right thing. Because I still haven't figured out this part yet. But basically now, instead of using function, I do use method with FF League, and then set up a default one that says FF League is not found for this connection. Platform, etc. So what MFL Connect looks like is an S3 object. So basically, S3 object, it returns an S3 object after doing some stuff. Yes, these spaces are not inconsistent, and you're killing me, John. Thank you very much. So basically, it takes all of these arguments, you use these arguments to create an S3 object, and then what this S3 object will do is have a class of MFLCon, and then I dispatch all the other generic arguments based on this class. So I have a print method for this, I have league and scoring and so on. Which all refer back to methods specific to S3. So the way you write S3 is very much like writing any other function, except you just put this dot at the end of it and the name of the class, and then you go on with your life and you make a generic that just refers to the name of the class. So all of these things are very similar and lets me write a lot of code that could eventually return some, for example, this would return a tibble of the exact same columns, but get it in a way specific to a different platform. So for a different platform like Sleeper, for example, would have different ways of getting to rosters or to franchises or to franchises.default. Cool. Questions? Do all S3 methods need the same arguments, or just the first one matters since that's what user Dispatch. They all need to have the arguments from the generic. So because I've defined ffleague as function with the con object, it's only going to pass this, and I can't specify anything else in ffleague. So in the method for ffleague for mflcon, which is here, I also have to have only the con object, otherwise it's a mismatch and it actually won't dispatch properly. So if I wanted to have other things, I could have, endpoint and seasons and whatever, but I would also have to copy those into the generic and put them here so that it would know to dispatch those arguments over to the next thing.
I have a question. Do the generic and the method have to have the arguments in the same order?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, or it has to have the same name.
I was gonna say it's gonna pass by name, but I wouldn't change the order. Just
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. That was occurred to me.
Yeah, so I have ffleague, so each like this kind of gets unwieldy, so after like 100 lines, I kind of move it into its own file. So FF scoring is in MFL scoring, specifically for the MFL platform. And then when I get to Sleeper, I would write a different function for Sleeper. That would be, I would internally call ff_scoring dot sleeper con instead of MFL con. This one's name. And that's all you need to do in order to have S3 and dispatch based on, so I can store this object. So what this looks like in action, I guess. This package. Okay, so what this kind of looks like in action would be something like, so I would create an NFL connection object with looking at the 2020 season and the league ID. Now has unlimited minutes. Did you buy Zoom while we were on the phone?
What? I didn't see that change. So we got unlimited?
We now have unlimited minutes.
Huh.
Yeah, I saw that message too.
Okay.
I don't know if it hides Zoom messages or Windows when it comes up, but okay. So we are going to start with the first. You guys see that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
So this is a MFL connection, which I'm showing you returns an S3 object, which is a list with a built-in get function. And the reason I did it this way, this is so that I can either have rate limit on or rate limit off, and just store it right in this list. I don't know if that's the best way. This is one of those like decisions that I made that I'm unsure about. But I'm also storing things like the season, the league ID, a bunch of user agents and authentication tokens, etc. in this object. So I'm going to save this into the environment as this this league is called the SSB, or Super Smash Bros. League. And then we get the league summary by running the FF League function without calling the NFL con specifically, and it will dispatch loop. So yeah, so you can see that I wrote an S3 method. It found right away the MFL con method, and it will run a summary of my fantasy football league settings. So you can see this is the league ID this, it's named this, there's 14 franchises. This is kind of scoring that it has. So it returns a data frame with a bunch of elements from my fantasy football league. It's a best ball league, and it has this type of scoring, and it's been active since 2018. You roster 35 players, and across the league, you roster about 500 total players, etc. Yes, Tony, I appreciate it. And so you can do this, and then get the rosters for this league, and this again. You can't see the package. It is on GitHub. And I can put it into the chat. I don't know why I capitalized that way. That's weird. And what this does is it runs a rate limited GET request and returns a data frame of rosters. So you can see there's 425 total players with these names and these IDs and these franchise names. So what this does differently than kind of the ordinary way is it abstracts a lot of the code that it took to get to here. So when you call the MFL endpoint, it does. So when you call this FF rosters thing, it calls the FF rosters method for the MFL con class, which is it gets the rosters endpoint, it drills down into this franchise, part of that JSON request, converts it to Tibble, hoists in rectangles, it does a whole bunch of stuff. It joins in the player names. So it normally just returns the IDs, and you have to join on the names separately. But in this case, I'm running a names calls to get the name ID, how old they are, when they were drafted, blah, blah, blah. It would normally return only the franchise ID, but I do this to return the name right in this call, so that you can see which team it belongs to without digging into which ID belongs to what. So basically, I'm abstracting a lot of this away, and the goal is to run something like this for each of the platforms that I'm familiar with, to help share, to make it this easy, like this many lines of code to get rosters, and not this many, which it used to take me like this many lines of code to do that same thing. Yeah, so that's the package. It does use S3. I've been trying to figure out how I would use R6 to improve this, but this is something that I might defer to Tyler, if he's still here. He's still here. And started writing a bit of it in R6, but it feels super unwieldy. Did I make helpers or validators, or is that extras, as the kids say? I did not. I do not anticipate people making their own classes or referring to the methods. Although maybe I should. I don't know. I don't see when you would do that.
I guess maybe if you had someone else that was helping you write this package, I don't know, like so there's consistency between the developers, but that's probably overkill if you're not doing that.
Well, yeah, and then the S3 object is very much like it's a list with stuff in it. So like it's an MFL connection class with a get function, a an integer or a double with the season, which year it is, and character. I don't know why these are inconsistent. I think that's just the way I've set it up. That's the way I just created it just now. That is. Maybe?
Is that MFL players function? That's like independent of the connection type. So is
Correct.
Okay.
So some of the stuff is meant to be shared, but the MFL players function is only for MFL. So I didn't bother making it a generic and then a method because Sleeper would probably have something different. So I haven't really I don't have a function that returns the player database from each platform. Although I probably should. Thanks, Tony.
One thing I'm kind of curious to see if you get around to implementing this is like something with like API keys. It's always cool to like have it stored in like a secrets file or like your R profile. So it's like you force the user to store it somewhere else so that like, no one else can go and like use your API key. So I think I was trying to do that once and I was like, I think I looked at like our tweak package to see how it was done in there. So that's kind of, it's separate from S3 or S4 or whatever, but interested to see how.
There's a new package coming for managing secrets that looks like it's going to be helpful. That our OpenSci has a new GitHub package, and then Jenny Bryan said that she's going to be implementing the same kind of system in like all the Google stuff that she writes. So it does feel like it's one of those. There are currently 5 ways to do secret management, and so now they have the definitive one, and so now there will be 6 ways to do secret management.
It's very fair.
It's just software development in general. So that's not our specific.
Oh no. That's the next KCD comic.
Oh, absolutely. So the way MFL does it is actually it returns a key with like a hashed user ID and password, which you can then pass into. Which you guys can send into the API as the username and password. There's definitely more complex and secure ways like OAuth, which is sort of the standard, and I think that might be where it would make sense to use R6. The reason why I think it makes sense to use R6 there is because the token can expire, so you would need to re-get the token if it expired while you're you would make a function. So basically the reason you would use R6 there, and I think this is what I think Kent was getting at, was that if the token happened to expire, you can say if token expired, get a new token and save it to my object without having to return the whole object again, right? So the idea that you can do something as a side effect, modify it in place, put in a new token, and then continue onward with that token would be a reason I think you would want to use R6, because to do it in S3, you would need, I think, super assignment or to return the actual connection object again. Does that make sense?
I think so. But like a token is just like like a flag for, oh, this is being cached somehow, or there's like we last retrieved this at this certain time. So I guess it's kind of like managing state in a way. So is that like why R6 seems more natural for that use case?
Yeah, because your token can expire. So the way OAuth works in very high level / back of the envelope terms is that you send it your client and secret. It returns a token based on that client secret and the time that you ask for that token, and then the token expires within a certain amount of time. So if your token happens to expire while you're still doing your interactive session, or I leave this open but come back to it tomorrow, all the stuff's still in the same environment, I would have to rerun the NFL Connect again to get a new token. So I would have to rerun this S3 method to get a new token before I could do anything else. Or I would have to supersign into SSBcon in this case in order to pass in that new auth token or cookie or what have you. So having a stateful connection object in this case is why you would want to have R6 so that you can manipulate state without having to supersign or create an environment or something else. I think.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. At least with the token management, right? Like if your token expired, your R6 class could see that and retrieve another token for you under the hood without you having to explicitly define the connection again.
Yeah, that's what I think Kent was getting at, and that's how I'm understanding it in this context. And that's probably the only benefit that I've found. I'm not quite sure if I should just be creating an environment, like a hidden environment or something that puts this get function into it instead of storing it as part of this object, because that's almost R6 encapsulation. But really, I could be creating an environment, to do so that's stored as one of the side effects of this NFL Connect, and then refer to that connection. That's how we dove recently into the internals of Memoize recently, and that's what it does, and it creates a secret environment that has a cache in it, and you can't actually see that environment, but it is created as a side effect of what's going on, of what you're doing. How the hell do you learn this? I get when you say. So this is interesting, related. I can't actually show you me using this, but Azure Graph is one of the ways that I have to do stuff with at work. It's how our interfaces with the Microsoft Graph REST API, and I've been dabbling with this because I need to do stuff with Microsoft Graph. Graph is basically, I wonder if I can show you. I'll try it before I do it on the shared screen. I'm gonna make sure I'm not going to expose anything. And yeah, OAuth is a pain in the ass, and that's one of the reasons why I think I learned it. So this is Graph, and this is some of the things that Graph can do. My company at work is on Office 365, so it does all of these things. I can access this API to do a whole bunch of things with Outlook or Teams or SharePoint, and the reason I learned about this package in particular was I wanted to use R to programmatically upload a file onto SharePoint. So what you would do is go into SharePoint, OneDrive, I think it's related, but basically you would send a request to this, you would send a get or a post or a put or a patch request to this URL, but you would need to have an access token, and that's what OAuth does. And then it took me quite a long time to figure out how to get from wherever I was into sending stuff here, because I needed to figure out like how OAuth worked, and it was sending the token from one to the other. If that makes sense. So OAuth is, yeah, you don't learn OAuth except by necessity. Public APIs are the best. And that's sort of why MFL is theoretically a public API. So I use that a lot, but a lot of like fantasy leagues like ESPN use OAuth, and so that's sort of, I know a little bit about it now between using this for work and using Azure Graph, which incidentally is an R6 package. I don't know if it's specifically because it needs to be R6 or it just happened to be that this programmer's preferred way to access it. I imagine it's something related to the tokens, like I was saying earlier. But you would, log in to, you would create a graph login. In this case, I think it's wrapped with an S3 wrapper. And then create a client. Not sure. But you use it like an R6 package, essentially. So, you do this, and then you can method chain to get the login, then get the subscription, get the resource group, and then add a role assignment, etc. Another thing you do as a noob is hammering APIs with requests. Can we talk about best practices, or are we way off topic? We are not way off topic in terms of what I have open. Definitely all about APIs right now. So right down that route. If you want to go down that route, it is 9 o'clock, so we can do this at another time if you guys don't want to stick around. A lot of APIs will tell you what their will tell you how many calls that you should make in a minute or within an hour. So in this case, Sleeper is under 1,000 API calls a minute, which is actually like insanely a lot. There's also, I think that must be a typo, because 1,000 calls a minute is like hammering the shit out of this API. MFL, the one I was showing you, is like a call a second. Is their limit, which is quite a lot more restrictive. So most of them are somewhere in between that, where you do 60 calls a minute versus 1,000. Like you'd have to have quite a robust API to take 1,000, I think. So, and yeah, Tony put in the ATTR API packages vignette, which is a lot of what I was doing. It's the one that suggested I return an S3 object as part of the connection string and as part of the content call. I think that was for
I want to see you do this for ESPN, because I swear I tried writing something for ESPNs, and I was like, I just downloaded the JSON file directly or manually because I couldn't figure out how to write like some connection object for it.
See, I linked the HTTR API vignette in here.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got it too.
Yeah, I did this. You just kind of follow along with this thing, along with whatever API you're doing, which is, you follow this thing, you figure out what it is, and then you ask a lot of questions until you understand it a little bit better. Oh yeah, I remember all these things. Okay, yeah, I can keep answering questions. There's a lot that's in this API package. Polite has a lot of other things. I kind of do Polite differently in that I like to set my own rate limits. So I load the rate limit R package in my code and the memorize package, and then specifically choose to memorize specific things. The bigger, more expensive calls that are like less time sensitive are memorized separately from anything else that I write. Because the idea is that this isn't like it's opinionated to like make sure that you memorize some things, and you always have a user agent and so on. I think Polite just wraps all of that together, but in a specific way. So I do a lot of what Polite does, but under the hood, without importing Polite.